Have you ever been part of a team where, well, despite everyone being really smart, really capable, things just seem to hit? Unexpected turbulence. Maybe it was, subtle communication glitches, or someone wasn't quite on the same page. Or maybe, just maybe, someone was a little too sure of their own position. Yeah, if that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. Today we're taking a deep dive into the Commercial Pilot's Handbook by Captain Ashutosh Chopra. We're focusing specifically on two really fundamental things for high-stakes environments: crew resource management, CRM, and the fascinating, sometimes tricky world of aviation automation. Our mission here is to cut through the jargon, the overcomplication that sometimes surrounds these topics. Captain Chopra's goal, and ours too, is to make these ideas simple, clear, and really relevant, not just for pilots, but honestly, for anyone navigating complex, high-pressure situations with other people involved. We're here to pull out the core insights you can actually use.
And it really is critical stuff. I mean, some people might think CRM is like beating a dead horse, as Captain Chopra even says himself. But its importance, it couldn't be clearer. As long as you're working in any kind of multi-person, high-consequence setting, getting your head around CRM is, well, paramount. And his whole aim, he states it right up front, is to simplify these things that often get made way too complex, make them accessible, make them actionable.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Captain Chopra kicks off his CRM chapter with this pretty striking quote, apparently from a captain to a co-pilot who wasn't too happy. Sure, I believe in resource management. You are the resource, I am the management.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That certainly sets a tone, doesn't it?
It really does.
And he immediately dives into this fundamental point about, well, we're human, and our human traits, well, they can cause big problems, especially somewhere like a cockpit. If machines flew themselves, these specific issues just wouldn't exist. I think probably many of us listening have had a boss, maybe a colleague, whose style felt a bit like that, right? At some point.
Probably, yeah. So how does Captain Chopra suggest we actually handle these very human challenges?
Well, a key idea is that CRM isn't just about stopping bad things. It's more like this sophisticated art of designing systems, designing interactions that harness our strengths, but also, crucially, mitigate our biases, our fallibility. Things we can't just wish away. It's about building resilience. The goal is what he calls a safe fail and fail safe approach.
Okay, safe fail and fail safe. Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. Think of safe fail as designing something so if it does fail, it does so in a way that minimizes the damage or risk. And fail safe is more like building it so it either prevents the failure in the first place or automatically reverts to a safe state if something goes wrong. And he really pushes the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. His argument is that pilots, under pressure, needing a fast response, they don't have time to recall complex textbook stuff. They need a heuristic understanding, like a quick mental shortcut, a rule of thumb that works, not a whole chapter memorized.
Right, quick, actionable stuff. And speaking of fast responses, that leads us straight into Colonel John Boyd's ODA loop, ODA. Observation, orientation, decision, action. Captain Chopra brings this up as the continuous cycle that aircrew are always in. It's a great framework, actually, for seeing where those human factors can sneak in and create threats.
Yeah, it is. And if you think about each stage, observing what's going on, orienting yourself to figure out what it means, making a decision, then acting, well, just having humans involved complicates every single step. Our biases, how we communicate or don't communicate, our different perceptions, it can all get in the way of doing that loop safely and quickly.
Okay, so building on that idea, mitigating human factors in the OD loop, Chopra then takes us right to the core of crew resource management. He breaks down the term itself. Pretty simple, really. The crew, meaning the job can't be done safely or efficiently by just one person. It takes a team. Then, each crew member is a resource. Everyone brings something to the table. And third, these resources, they must be managed. It's that basic. So how do you actually manage that team, those resources, in such a high-stakes place?
The book really emphasizes robust standard operating procedures, SOPs. These aren't just, checklists for the sake of it. They define who does what, how it gets done, how tasks are shared. They provide that essential framework for consistent responses so different situations don't lead to wildly different crew actions.
And one really interesting idea he brings up is this concept of self-synchronous work. That's the ideal, right? Where everyone gets the big picture, knows their role, and contributes effectively without needing constant direction from above. That's where you get real synergy.
That sounds amazing. Like the dream team scenario. It is the ideal, yeah. But as the author points out, it's often hard to fully achieve in the real world.
Right. Does he say why it's so hard to get there? Even with trained pilots, what gets in the way of that perfect synergy?
Well, he implies that even with great SOPs, you still have human variables, personalities, communication styles, workload, things that prevent perfect lockstep. And that's exactly why, in the more realistic world, the pilot in command's, the PIC's, intent becomes absolutely critical. Since the PIC can't micromanage every single action, their overall goal, their intent for that phase of flight, needs to be crystal clear to everyone. That provides the focus, the prioritization, even within the SOPs. It bridges that gap between the ideal and the reality.
Gotcha. So even with the best SOPs, the human factor means you need constant communication. Chosra stresses what's implied and stated as such. This means using really precise language, like the official radio phraseology, and importantly, a single globally understood language, English, crucially, without accents that could cause confusion.
Yeah, and why the big emphasis on continuous communication? It's because every single action on the flight deck, someone adjusting something, flipping a switch, needs to be announced, so everyone knows what's happening. Same goes for changes in the environment, instructions from air traffic control, changes in speed or altitude, warning lights coming on. Announce it. This constant talking actually forces better observation and better orientation for the whole crew. It leads to much higher shared situational awareness.
But again, we're human. Communication isn't just talking, it's being heard, being understood.
Yeah.
And there can be real barriers, right? Someone being heavy-handed, fatigue, being preoccupied, just sheer workload. The handbook suggests you can even pre-manage some of this, like building a professional, cordial relationship before the flight. That helps make people more receptive later on.
Exactly. And Chopra lists his essentials of effective communication. It needs to be complete, correct, clear, crisp, concise, courteous, coherent, and considerate. Quite a list.
The C's, yeah.
Right. But maybe the most critical point he makes is about feedback. He says, communication is complete only after feedback is received. You have to know it landed, that it was understood as intended.
Okay, so all this observation, all this communication, it's all building towards this shared picture of what's going on. And it has to be shared, right? It's no good if only one person sees the hazard.
Precisely. And that brings us back to orientation in the OODA loop. That's basically developing situational awareness essay. But here's the crucial bit. Everyone might think they're situationally aware, but their awareness, their picture, could be different. And if there are errors because of those different perceptions, nobody might realize it until it's too late. So to make sure orientation is correct, that essay must be common, a shared understanding. And communication, like we said, is how you guarantee that common essay.
It's only when you clear up any ambiguity, any fuzziness in what people are seeing or how they're interpreting it, that you can actually make a correct decision. Chopra points out that orientation is often the longest part of the OODA loop. And disorientation, its opposite, leads to paralysis, procrastination. Basically, catastrophic delays in deciding and acting.
And the better that shared essay is, the more the crew can work self-synchronously, like we talked about earlier, coherently. This massively compresses the OODA loop time. It cuts down the time from seeing something to doing something about it. Makes the whole operation faster, safer.
This all seems to hinge on one key ingredient for making decisions together: mutual professional respect. For everyone to feel they can contribute and for their contribution to be valued as a resource, that respect has to be there.
Yeah, and another interesting point he makes is that respect based purely on rank. You know, the stripes on the shoulder might not be enough. Biases can creep in. Maybe you heard something about someone. Professional jealousy, stuff like that. So everyone on the crew has to make an effort to be courteous, be cordial.
And this next bit is fascinating. He introduces the I am okay, you are okay idea. He calls it the green sector, where real professional mutual respect lives. And he gives this really practical tip. Just have some casual non-work chat before the formal briefing starts. Get to know each other a tiny bit. Apparently, this simple thing really helps shape the environment. It makes it feel more collaborative, helps people feel like they'll actually be heard, that they're part of a team, not just individuals thrown together.
It makes a difference. And looking at it broadly, that respect is what allows, say, a first officer to be assertive, to speak up if they see something wrong. And it's the captain's job to create that environment where all input is genuinely welcomed and considered. It's about leadership commanding, he says, not demanding. But it's also about followership, too. Supporting the leader, understanding their intent. Both roles are equally vital, and both need respectful communication.
Time, obviously, is another huge factor in that OODA loop. Chopra talks about buying time, maybe asking for a holding pattern to run a checklist properly. But also, just as important, not piling on extra workload with unnecessary demands when things are already busy. Which, again, comes back to that mutual respect, doesn't it?
It does, and a really key insight here is that CRM is the collective responsibility of the whole crew. It's not just on the pilot in command. Every crew member should be thinking, how can I best support the PIC right now? And to help that, the PIC needs to constantly communicate their intent. It's this continuous loop of shared effort.
And one last crucial piece Captain Chopra highlights is task division. Super important to CRM, especially the rigid management of the flight path, who's flying, who's monitoring. The pilot flying focuses solely on that. The pilot monitoring cross-checks everything meticulously. He notes that a huge number of CFET accidents, controlled flight into terrain, happen because of lapses right here, which just hammers home, again, why you need those robust SOPs. So after laying all this out, Captain Chopra gives his ultimate simplification of crew resource management. Ready for it?
Lay it on us.
Good CRM. Adherence to robust SOPs plus professional mutual respect plus effective communication.
Wow, that really boils it down.
It does, doesn't it? 3 pillars: SOPs, respect, communication. That's a really clear takeaway from Captain Chopra. Okay, so we've dug into the human side with CRM, but Chopra's handbook also tackles another massive force in modern cockpits: automation. Now, obviously, automation has brought huge benefits, right? Less fatigue from hand flying, better accuracy, smoother rides for passengers, even flying in worse weather.
Yeah.
But it also brings its own unique set of human challenges.
And this is where it gets really interesting, actually, because while the machines, the systems themselves are incredibly reliable now, much more than they used to be, the human in the loop interacting with that automation, that's created this persistent, unique set of problems. The author points to things like pilots becoming less reliant on their basic manual flying skills, or becoming overconfident that the automation will just handle everything perfectly. And ironically, sometimes a loss of the crew's own self-confidence when the automation does something unexpected, when it misbehaves.
That's a really deep point. So what's the big danger there? This overconfidence or loss of confidence? And does Chopra offer ways pilots can fight against that, maybe that dependency on the FMS, the flight management system? Like, are there specific things he suggests to keep those manual skills sharp?
He absolutely does. The really alarming consequence he flags is pilots failing to step in to intervene when the automation isn't doing what it's supposed to. And that has, tragically, led to aircraft getting into dangerous situations. He gives this glaring example, he calls it, seeing pilots with their heads down, buried in the FMS, programming something that could easily and maybe more quickly be done manually. Sometimes both pilots are doing it. He sees this as a sign of that lack of self-confidence and basic skills, and maybe even a misunderstanding of what the automation is really for. So to fight this, Chopra really pushes for a mindset shift. Pilots need to see automation not as a replacement, but as a tool they actively manage. He stresses they need to consciously practice manual flying, even when the automation is on. Not just hands-on flying, but keeping the mental picture, the mental model of what the plane is doing and where it's going. He suggests pilots regularly exercise those manual skills, maybe in the simulator, specifically practicing scenarios where the automation fails or does something weird, forcing them back to basic control. It's about keeping that muscle memory, both physical and mental, sharp. Keeping confidence in their own ability high, that stops the over-reliance.
That's a really key distinction, isn't it? Automation is a tool you manage, not a crutch you lean on. It sounds like he's saying pilots have to stay proactively engaged, always thinking ahead of the airplane, even when it's technically flying itself.
Exactly. He argues that truly understanding automation isn't just knowing which buttons to push. It's understanding its limits, its potential failure modes. Pilots have to be able to predict what the automation should do and instantly spot when it deviates. That allows for timely, effective manual intervention. So it's that proactive monitoring plus disciplined manual practice that maximizes the safety benefits while mitigating those human factor risks inherent in automation. It's about always being ready to be the ultimate backup.
So we've navigated through these core principles: robust SOPs, clear communication, shared awareness, mutual respect, all driving that OD loop. We've touched on this paradox of automation, an amazing tool, but one demanding constant human vigilance and skill.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, really, building on this source material here. If even industries like commercial aviation, which are incredibly advanced, incredibly safety-focused, still wrestle constantly with these fundamental human factors, how we interact with tech, how we interact with each other, well, what does that suggest about our own teams, our own decision-making, our reliance on technology every single day? How might these lessons from the cockpit apply directly to you?
Yeah, that's definitely something to chew on. We really encourage you to think about how these principles, clear communication, mutual respect, really understanding your tools, whether that's software or machinery or just teamwork, how they show up in your own work, maybe even your personal life. Keep diving deep, keep exploring how to build better teams and clearer communication wherever you are.